Hello, I'm Mila. I'm working in e-recruiting as a UX engineer, where I'm involved in both UX design and front-end development. And today I'm going to talk about some of the similarities between those two domains, because oftentimes they're seen as somewhat opposite of each other. So let's talk about some of the misconceptions first. I often hear people say design is only for creative people and designing is all about creating something beautiful and aesthetically pleasing. Whereas coding is often seen as almost the opposite, not creative at all, and only very analytical people or math geniuses can do it. But in my opinion, coding and design actually have a lot in common. What do I think are some of the most important similarities? The first and probably the most important one is that both coding and design involve a lot of problem solving. In coding, this is pretty obvious since you're always faced with different challenges when developing, and there's almost always multiple solutions to a problem. And your goal is to find the best solution for your specific case. In design, this is pretty similar. You always need to find a way to implement your feature in the most easy to use and beautiful way possible, while still taking into account all the requirements from your product. Oftentimes, this requires certain compromises or creative solutions, which leads me to my next point. Both designers and developers need to be creative, because finding a simple solution to a complex problem almost always requires creativity. You might need to look at your problem from a different angle and come up with a completely new approach to solve your problem. Someone else's solutions might not fit your needs. This is how innovation happens, and also one of the reasons why diversity in tech matters. People with different backgrounds bring different ideas to the table. My next point, which connects especially design system and code bases, is that both benefit from a modular approach. Usually a good design system and a good code base have components that are made out of smaller functional units, which means that a code or design element is more reusable, which leads to a higher consistency since you're always using the same elements. Last but not least, less is more. Most users prefer a simple design over a complex one. They want their most important features easily accessible and not be overwhelmed with too many options. And the same can be said for code bases. No one wants a super complex code base because it makes it hard to maintain. This actually happens a lot, where many companies will have some legacy code lying somewhere in a dark corner that developers are just too afraid to touch because they don't fully understand it. To wrap things up and also to support my last point, let's end with one of my favorite quotes from the famous French author Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. A designer knows he achieved perfection not when there's nothing left to add, but when there's nothing left to take away. I think this is very well said, because many times we don't realize how much easier it is to add complexity than to remove it. So yeah, thanks for listening. I hope you learned something new, and maybe you'll also start seeing some of the similarities between code and UX design. Thanks.